Hello, folks. John Shinholser here, live in Richmond, Virginia with the McShin Foundation, Getting Heard podcast, award winning, I might remind everybody. And today we have a really good show lined up, and half of our people showed up. Parker Walton from Walton Selects out in Colorado. I forget that little town you come from. What town is that again, Parker?
It's actually in Rye, Colorado.
Rye, Colorado. Are you in Rye or are you in Richmond?
I'm in Rye right now.
You in Rye? How's the weather out there, man?
It's cold. It's cold and snowy right now.
Oh boy, you got snow on the ground?
Yeah, we've got about 4 inches on the ground right now. So,
uh-oh, folks back east that like skiing, they'd be wishing they was in Colorado right now. But we got a Dr. Kenneth Finn who's supposed to join us. I'm not exactly sure why he's not here, but whether he attends or not, we're gonna have a good talk today, anyways, Parker. So I tell the folks briefly who you are and what you do. Most people know I'm the president and co-founder of McShin, a person in long-term recovery from substance use disorders, which means I've been clean and sober almost 40 years this August. But I'm also very interested in the cannabis topic and all the good, bad, and ugly about cannabis. And I know you're an expert in it, but just briefly tell our audience who you are and what you do.
yeah, my name is Parker Walton. I've been the owner-operator of a cannabis cultivation in Colorado since 2014 under the name of Cannacraft. Walton Select is a company that my brother and I, Matthew Walton, have kind of put together, spearheading education, trying to spearhead education as the newly regulated cannabis industry unfolds across the country, more specifically in Virginia right now. I'm a Virginia native, born and raised, moved out to Colorado for cannabis back in 2014. We've just been waiting to come back home and to do it in Virginia. So now that the doors are opening up, we're just trying to help educate the folks in Virginia so that we all have a good, honest, moral, basis to push forward from with this industry.
Well, that's good. So just in case the good doctor shows up, we'll defer some of the good, bad, and ugly conversation about cannabis. You know how good it is, how bad it is, because he was the counterpart on. He's got some scientific evidence apparently on some of the negative stuff about it. And I wanted to get his spin on that. But since it's just me and you, I want to just jump right into what's happening here in Virginia because we'll have Virginia people listening today and moving forward. So, Colorado, you were there when they rolled out legal adult use cannabis in Colorado, and you've seen the way agencies and bureaucracy, how things have taken their turns. What do you see as a big problem Virginia's facing right now with their adult use rollout?
Personally, I have a big concern with corporate cannabis coming in and taking over the entire scene, the entire industry in Virginia. The way the medical program is set up with only 5 licenses, those licenses being controlled by very, very big players. Most of them are pharmaceutical backed to some degree. I think my biggest concern is the small guy getting pushed out. The people that really bring a lot of love and passion to the cultivation of this plant, which I think at the end of the day makes a tremendous difference in the overall medicinal quality of that final product. You just have major corporations coming in, seeing dollar signs, and not really thinking about the consumer or the patient at the end of the day. My biggest fear is the patient, the medicinal cannabis patient being really pushed out of this industry very, very quickly, and being priced out by the products that are really providing help. So I think everybody's got to be really, really aware of the fact that as these states and as everybody's pushing forward this regulation, that you really need to go in and read these bills. Something that happened in California. There's a lot of regulation that was voted on under this guise of legal cannabis, and everybody was really excited about that. But a lot of the forms and a lot of the format of that legislation and regulation was really geared to just really push it in the hands of really big corporate players, things that just had astronomical licensing fees, just things that really push out the common player, the small guys that have passion for this at the end of the day, and the ones that really should be doing the cultivating in this scene, in my opinion.
So you mentioned big players. Obviously, you needed these big players to get the ball rolling here. So I think we can, slap them on the back for that. Thank you so much for spending millions of dollars and greasing the wheel and getting medical cannabis approved here in Virginia. But now the biggest market's going to be consumption by adults, and yet the medical folks want to control or at least want to monopolize the adult use, the legal cannabis use. But in my mind, see, I'm just a simple guy. I know you drive around Virginia, we have hundreds of wineries, okay, where people get to go out and buy a piece of land, grow grapes. They can either sell those grapes to a winery or they can create their own, wine making stuff. And then I see we must have hundreds of wineries, hundreds of breweries, these microbreweries where they get to go open up a brewery, make their own beer, and have customers come in and buy it. And we even have stills, legal stills in Virginia where you can create your own homegrown still. But I don't see none of those products being over regulated or bureaucratized like I see what they're trying to do to cannabis. Because I've been downtown during a couple of these meetings, and it's almost comical the way these special interest folks, these lobbyists, and these politicians are moving forward. And I keep asking myself, why don't they just keep it simple? Why are they complicating this? You got any idea, Parker, why they want to do this?
I think it has a lot to do with the fact that it's been illegal and it's been prohibited for so long that I think everybody's when I say everybody, I mean the regulators and the lawmakers are very, very cognizant of the fact that we're dealing with a substance that has been taboo for most of all of our lives. So I think it's difficult to take something that has been sold to us as something that's so horrible, all through the reefer madness, something that is just so terrible for everybody, where now it's like almost overnight that they're accepting it. So I think they're playing that is just to try to over regulate it and to regulate it as much as they can to show people that, okay, it is, it still might be dangerous, but we're doing everything that we can to eliminate that danger. But at the end of the day, in my opinion, the regulations that they're putting in are doing nothing to protect the consumer or the patient at the end of the day. All it's doing is providing roadblocks for business owners trying to get into the business. So, as far as what their ultimate agenda is at the end of the day, I can't tell. But all I know is as a small owner, small business owner and operator in this space, these regulations make it very, very difficult day to day to run a business.
So let's start from the beginning. Let's say you want to, like I know here in Virginia, that you go to a lot of places that sell growing apparatuses, dirt, soil, grow tents, lights. The people giving away seeds, okay? And God bless folks for giving seeds away, not trying to make a buck. They want to see a lot of people grow stuff, kind of like Johnny Appleseed on every corner with the cannabis seeds. But you really don't know what seeds they're giving away. Not saying they're poisonous or anything, but they might be saying it's supposed to be a good strain or whatever, and it turns out to be a cheap strain. Who knows? So how do you think if Virginia were to create a good seed verification type system, which they have a pretty strong seed bureaucracy as far as corn and tomatoes and other plants go, how would you just let's focus on the seeds for a minute. How do you think the seed rollout should look here in Virginia?
That's always a precarious topic for any newly regulated industry that's seeing adult use or even medical. Because there's this concept of just artificial insemination, kind of, where this stuff is just coming out of nowhere. It's just, where are these genetics coming from that these cultivators are starting off with, these licensed operations? Where are they getting these seeds? And ultimately, it comes back. It's really hush hush, but ultimately, what it is the state kind of turns their head for a period of time for these licenses to go out onto the black market, is really what it is, and collect genetics so that they can cultivate it in their legal space. And in Colorado, we were grandfathered in. There was a time frame that you had at, I forget exactly how long it was. There was a time frame that the MED in Colorado, which is the Marijuana Enforcement Division, they came out and they said, we understand that these genetics have to come from somewhere, so we're going to give you X amount of time to bring all this stuff into the system. Once that time is over, we kind of shut it closed, and then nothing else can come into the system from there unless it's verified already in the system. So as Virginia push forwards, it's extremely important that the seed material and that the genetics that people are starting to buy, that there's transparency to what it is. There's lots of different cultivars. There's lots of different genetics in cannabis nowadays. So it could really be anything as far as a crapshoot of what you're getting. There is no standardized system to track this stuff or to look at this stuff or even to compare it to anything else. So at this point, you're really just taking the word of whoever you're buying the seeds from or whoever you're getting those seeds from to the legitimacy of what that material actually is. So, for a big purpose of what we're trying to do with Walton Select is on the cross hybridization and genetic side, where we'll start to go in and look at this stuff on a molecular level, get the sequencing of this genetic code, and start to be able to create a standardized system that everything can be compared to looking back. And that's, in my opinion, that's something that should be open source. It's something that shouldn't be privatized, because not there's no one person in the world that has all of this information right now that anybody knows of that's public. So, to create something like this, it's really going to help the industry. It should be an open source system that everybody that has interest in putting their 2 cents, so to speak, into this can, and creating the most detailed system that we can as far as the cannabis genome and the cannabis genetics.
So I hear there's two type of cannabis. It's indica and sativa. Does that sound right?
Those are just characteristic. Those are terms just to generally describe the growth characteristics of a plant. So historically, sativa is something that is coming from equatorial regions, something that is narrow leaf. Sativa purely just means narrow leaf, where indica is something that is going to be something more broader leaf. So when you're talking about sativa indica, especially with where we are nowadays with cannabis genetics, it really tells you nothing. It tells you nothing to have a differentiation or ratio between sativa to indica.
So the only difference between indica and sativa is the leaf. One's broad leaf, one's narrow leaf.
Scientifically, that's the only difference in those two terms. Through time, we've put different meanings to what a sativa is and what an indica is, because naturally, when we're talking about land-raised genetics, things that would grow on this earth without us, and that they do cannabis all around the world, things that are going to be more narrow leaf are going to be more psychoactive naturally, where things that are going to be more broadleaf are going to be more narcotic. And that's the basis of it, and that's where those characteristics have, they've kind of gained their appeals and their effects in this community, as far as saying, oh, this is a sativa or this is an indica, but it's really telling you nothing. It's telling you nothing at all.
Okay, so and then some seeds they're called feminized, and some is called auto. What do they mean?
So there's even more types than twos. I mean, really, when you're dealing with cannabis sativa, which is the scientific name for what we're discussing. When we're discussing marijuana or hemp, it is the same exact plant. It is cannabis sativa. Within that, you have regular seed material and you have feminized seed material. So regular seed material means that when you pop those seeds out, that you have a chance to either get a male or a female plant. Feminized means that when you plant those seeds out, that the vast majority of those, if not all of them, scientifically, it's not 100%. There is a chance to get a male through feminized, but it's much, 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 much less. So in theory, the feminized seeds, you're only going to be dealing with females. The allure and the draw to that nowadays is that if you don't have to worry about it, culling a male before it pollinates your crop as you go into flower. Male plants produce pollen, which pollinate female plants. So if you're flowering a female plant out to cultivate for the bud material itself, then you do not want a male to be around, because once that male pollinates that female sends all of its energy into seed production. Once seed is being produced, it no longer is focusing on the production of the bud or the medicine, so to speak, of the plant.
So okay. See, I'm learning every time I have a conversation with you. I learn something because you do talk fast, and I'm a slow comprehender of words. But so if you can grow male and female plants, they'll both have flowers. But once a female plant gets the male pollen, then that plant's gonna grow more seeds and bud material.
Yeah, so all of its energy at that point, once it's pollinated, will start going into seed production and less into the flower production and the
Well,
bud production.
that explains why I was a kid smoking all that Mexican and Colombian stuff. It was loaded with seeds, man. So it must have been outdoor plants where they couldn't stop the pollen from coming.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Man, I tell you what, the things, if only I knew then, man. So an auto means you can grow a plant like I got some seeds from the wizard, and I'm growing some plants. See if I can be a cultivar. I'll learn how to do this. And from what I understand, I got 18 hours of light, 6 hours of darkness. But when I flip it from 12 hours of light, they'll automatically go into bud mode.
So, are you speaking on auto flower seeds, so to speak, or just in general?
Yeah, I got some seeds from your brother,
Okay,
Kool-Aid. So
okay. And those are going to be regular seeds. So when we're talking about auto flower, we're talking about a different genus of cannabis.
okay.
So it's not cannabis sativa
Is there a
anymore.
is there a photo or an auto? Do they use the word photo?
What it's photo period.
Photo
So
period. I think these are photos.
yeah, so that's the two classifications now that auto flowering has become popular in industry, and more and more people are seeing it. So you either have a photo period specific plant, or you have an auto flowering plant. An
Okay.
auto a photo specific plant is what you're talking about as far as initiating different light cycles. So as long as you're keeping that plant in 18 hours of light, that plant will remain in a perpetual veg state. So that plant will never go and start flowering as long as it's getting 18 to 24 hours light. It is cultivar dependent as well. Certain cultivars can handle, 14 to 16 hours, but that we're picking hairs here. When we're talking about photo period, we're talking about two different stages. So the plant having a vegetative stage that is dictated by the light cycle, and then in order to initiate the flower cycle, the bud set starting to create the bud on the plant, you have to drop that light period down to 12 hours of darkness, 12 hours of light. So the increased darkness time is what causes the photo period specific plants to begin flowering. When we're talking about auto flowering plants, they are not photo period specific. So those plants will begin to flower under 24 hours of light if given. So once those auto flowering plants reach a certain age, they will start to flower regardless of the photo period that they're receiving. And that's the biggest difference between photo period specific and auto flowering plants is the photo period specific, the ones that we're talking about, the regular and the feminized seeds of cannabis sativa. Those that you need to change the light cycle in order to initiate flowering. For auto flower plants, more of the ruderalis, cannabis ruderalis genus, those are the ones that will flower regardless of how much light they're getting. Once they reach it,
Or how little light.
or how little light, yeah.
Right.
So once they reach a certain amount of time, they will start flowering. That's actually a good question because I don't have a tremendous amount of experience with autoflower, so I'm not sure what that threshold is about how little light they can receive for them to still do what they need to do. That's probably something that's being explored pretty heavily in the autoflower space. It's probably something that's very cultivar dependent, genetic dependent.
Are you familiar with the Kool-Aid seeds that Matthew gave me?
Intimately, yes.
Okay, well, the plants, I guess they got to be 2 months old right now, and again, they're still small, kind of bushy. They look pretty cool. Yeah, I'm proud of this, because I want to be really good at this, and but they haven't grown very tall, and at some point, do they sprout up or?
And there's so many variables that come into cultivation. There's environmental conditions as far as your temperature, humidity, and your light intensity. All of those things play a massive difference in how these genetics express.
Oh,
And
you're gonna like this. Okay, I got them in a 10. Okay, I got 80 degrees and 40-degree humidity. I got
yeah,
the $500 light, and I keep it 18 inches above the top of the plant. And that's what I got. What I know. So
yeah, and that's the thing. And that's with cultivation becoming so popular now. It is a very specific. It's not easy. Cultivating cannabis is not an easy thing. It's made out to be much easier than it is. Being able to more light intensity can cause the plant to stay shorter. Less light intensity can cause that plant to
yeah, I got
stretch.
to turn halfway up. It's one of those lights you can crank all the way up or all the way down. I got it like halfway turned up.
Yeah. So there's a lot of things. It's hard for me to say right here. Why they might be staying
Right.
more stout.
Right.
There's a lot of factors that
Well, I
come
got
into
to
it.
run it a litter on the seeds, obviously, man. I mean,
No,
I've been
sir.
around a little.
No, sir. No, sir. No, sir. Only the
now,
best for Mr. John.
now, I got my recovery friends. They wonder what am I doing growing cannabis. I said, well, I want to know everything I can about this space because I'm developing relationships in this space. But like my own family members, who consume, cannabis, they they can do that. You know, they're not like me where one's too many, 1,000 never know. But I got them lining up for them plants when they start budding, though, man. So I won't have no problem finding people out there tell me what we got.
Yeah.
So I'm excited about that. But now here in Virginia, I'm irritated with our politicians a little bit, and I happen to have been in a lot of people's houses throughout my life in Virginia, and I've been to some of these wine cellars people have, and I got friends. You walk down to their basement, which is the size of their house. It's floor to ceiling, wall to wall. They must have 10,000 bottles of wine down. There's no limit on how many different brands and flavors of wine. And I got to thinking, these cannabis consumers in Virginia, they probably might like to grow plants, and buds keep a long time in those jars. I see. Is that correct?
It's again, it's really dependent on the environmental conditions that you're keeping it in. The two biggest degraders to the quality of cannabis is light, is UV and oxygen. So as long as you're keeping them stored in an airtight container that's not coming into contact with sunlight, then I mean, you can really store this stuff for a long time. Technology, we're
Like
learning a lot
a
now.
year or two, 3 years, 4 years.
I'd say, yeah, a couple years you could store. We've stored cannabis in glass jars for a couple years. You will have degradation to a certain degree, but you're also getting a different product as well as that bud sits in that jar and it cures. It's starting to take on different qualities. And that's what part of the cure is it's almost refining, whatever you are curing. So
So
as that
so 2-year-old bud stored right is either going to be better or worse or more
it's
likely better.
It's gonna be different.
Different.
It's hard to say better or worse. I guess that really is it's a perspective thing. That's very subjective, but it will be different. As those terpenes have time to sit and evolve, it will create a different smell, a different effect, different flavor, different taste. So the cure does have a massive effect on how this product changes over time.
Yeah, but I can see where home growers they want to be able to grow a couple few plants of one strain, store the buds, grow a couple few more plants, store the buds. I don't think 4 plants is enough, and I don't think that that 1 ounce limit is appropriate. I think a homeowner should be able to grow a couple dozen plants at a time at different stages. They should have 20 different jars in their cannabis cellar. Call it what you want. I mean, this is the stuff that's irritating me. It's like we're being discriminated against coming out the box, coming out the gate.
Yeah, we're being treated like criminals from day one, and that's where we're coming from. Unfortunately, is prohibition. So cannabis, there's still so much taboo with cannabis, where a lot of these regulators and lawmakers, I think their biggest fear in making these low plant counts, 4 plants for a homeowner, is just trying to limit how much of that product is going back into the black market. But it doesn't at the end of the day, because there is no size restraints on how big you can grow those plants. So you could literally grow 4 trees and you could get pounds and pounds and pounds of cannabis off of it.
Well, I'm glad
Um,
you mentioned the size because I was at your facility in Colorado and I got pictures of you next to these plants that are taller than you.
mhm.
Okay. And I'm wondering why did your Kool-Aid brand grow 6 feet tall, but my Kool-Aid brand ain't but 8 inches. I keep looking for I want them to push the top of my tent up, in my shed.
Yeah, yeah. And
So,
that's all the environments are a little
uh,
bit different.
all
So
right, now you mentioned black market, okay? Now I understand, like just in a 6 month period, the cost of quality cannabis in Colorado has gone way down because a neighboring state has different laws and it's cheaper for people to go over there and buy it, or
I think as far as what's going on in Colorado, I think there's a lot of things at play. It's hard for anyone to really say definitively what's going on. Oklahoma came online about 2 years ago, and Oklahoma is, for lack of a better way to describe it, completely wide open. They have really just embraced cannabis cultivation, and they really are not regulating it at all comparatively to where the other states are. So you have a lot of people that have gone out to Oklahoma, gotten licensed or not licensed, and just cultivating a lot of cannabis because the laws are very lenient to that around that area now. So you have a lot of product being produced there, for the legal market and also for the legal market. So
I wish the doctor would have showed up today because I think everybody with half a brain got to agree that a product like tobacco and nicotine got to be worse than cannabis. I mean, would that be a safe argument?
And I'm a cannabis enthusiast, so of course I'm biased on this, but I totally agree with you. Especially medical doctors that are prescribing opioids for pain and all these things. I mean, I look at this as an option. I
Well,
don't think that.
well, the reason I brought that up because, like in Virginia, they're very proud of their tobacco heritage. Okay, we're a big
Mhm.
tobacco state, always have been. But in the last 20, 30 years, with the reduction in teen use of nicotine, they cut back on a lot of things. But the point is this: for years, whatever you could buy a pack of cigarettes for in Virginia was 10 times more in New York.
Mhm.
But yet, at the same time, you can buy cigarettes in Virginia, damn near at every mini mart, 7-Eleven, grocery store, everybody sells them, okay? And yet people would buy low here and then go up to New York and sell high. But they have agencies that look out for that stuff and they monitor it and they enforce the rules and the regulations and the laws. And every now and
Mhm.
then I go to a lot of jails and prisons, as you know, and every now and then I'll be sitting in there with a guy doing 5 years because he had a pickup truckload of cigarettes he took up to New York. And and by the time you get done talking to him, you realize he was part of a $2 million a year sting operation. It wasn't really small potatoes.
Mhm.
But yet here in Virginia, they're opening up the cannabis industry, and they're doing more than discriminate, more than rigging, more than stigmatizing, more than demonizing. It's like they want it to fail coming out the gate, and there's just so much hate and naysayers out there, and it just drives me crazy. It's a continuation. It's almost going to be like Cannabis Crow is coming. We had Jim Crow, we had Recovery Crow, now we got Cannabis Crow right around the
Mhm.
corner. And you're pretty knowledgeable on all the other states' rollout. So if you could give some just simple talking points, what should Virginia do when it comes to rolling out this? How should it look? What should the model really look like if you could create it?
I think it all comes down to your supply and your demand. I think where all the markets, in my opinion, to date have failed with regulated recreational adult use cannabis has been in allowing too many cultivators to saturate the market. It's of course there's a massive demand for cannabis in these new states as they roll out, and of course the states are trying to create as much revenue as they can off of this demand. But at the same token, if you don't control how much product is being put into the market, you see what you see in Colorado and Oregon and Washington State and California. That happens year after year. Is that there's just too much product, too many people producing, and not enough people buying, which ultimately drives the price down. It becomes a price war. Cannabis, is going to be looked. It's becoming more and more of a commodity every day. But we cannot, in my opinion, turn our backs on the medicinal properties of this plant as well. That takes it and makes it something more than a commodity. I think that there's a group of people that are, I think everybody at the end of the day, not just a group of people. When I say a group of people, I'm speaking on medicinal patients, but I think everybody at the end of the day loses out when it becomes a price war. Who can produce the cheapest pound of cannabis, and that being the only differentiating factor in a market. I think that is the biggest problem that I've seen from state to state. In trying to speak to Virginia, I really hope to see that they start to monitor these cultivation licenses from day one. Not something that they come back and look at a couple years down the road, but something that they are on top of from day one to make sure that there is not an oversaturation of product, which drives the price down, which ultimately drives the quality down. Once you start driving the quality down, you start to have an inferior product all across the market. And then you get people like myself who have a passion for it, that want to produce a very high quality product, that is finding it very difficult to be able to do that. And as you have more and more people like myself who are tremendously passionate about cannabis, but not able to play in the regulated game, where do you think all these people are going to go? They're going to go to the market that's existed, the black market that's always been there for the past 40, 50 years. So I think a lot of the states that the laws that they're pushing, they're just making all the people that really should be cultivating cannabis not able to. So they're going to go do it where they can and where they have been. So I think it's a massive perpetuation of the black market and not noticing the fact that lower quality product on the rec market is going to force people back to the black market.
I wasn't here in 1933, obviously, when they repealed prohibition. But I do know, like during World War II, which is, less than 10 years after the repeal of prohibition, you can you can Google like beer, liquor, and wine advertisement, and you can see where there was like hundreds of different beer companies, beer labels, wine labels, liquor labels, and I would dare say by the 1970s, what we saw was like Anheuser-Busch and the Clydesdales and Militime, and so some major players did, I guess, through buying up corporations. They had big commodity, big corporate conglomerates. Yet in the last 20 years, you go to a 7-Eleven or bar, you see more microbreweries and startups. So I guess what I'm saying is I don't think politicians should be worried about this. What you say is correct. Supply and demand. Let the consumers drive these markets and these policies, not politicians. Also, when they started doing their excise tax back in 33, there was a percent was supposed to go to help like alcoholics. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
But eventually, I guess that money went more to the enforcement side, the police, the jails, the prisons, and less money to treat the people with the illness consuming the products.
Mhm.
Even though 85% of the consumers don't have an issue or problem. And I think those numbers are parallel with cannabis. There's going to be a percent of folks that's going to have a problem. They're going to need help. But I just don't see our policymakers setting aside an appropriate amount of funding to provide the appropriate amount of relief for these people coming. So I have a great interest in seeing to it that this thing gets done right all the way across the board. Hence the relationships with this industry, because I want to support the industry appropriately, adult like, mature like, based on the best science we got. But I also want to make sure the people that need it and need help, whether it be medical cannabis use or recovery from over consumption of adult use. So I'm looking at this from all angles. So I'm kind of a special guy, I think. I wish the doctor would have showed up because I really wanted to ask him what is the real science starting to show. Do you have any idea? Some of the good stuff about cannabis. Then we'll get into some of the negative stuff.
Yeah, and that's the biggest thing for me is education. It's we're getting into a place for the first time, and since the 1940s, that we could even really research this plant, legally and be able to put, the proper money and the proper scientific research behind it to truly get good answers, not answers that's driven by policy or driven by biasness, but science that is just science. That is we're just looking to get good information. I think there's a lot more of these studies that are being done overseas, in England, in India. A lot of these places are really, I think, in my opinion, leading the charge as far as good, transparent research into this stuff. I was definitely looking forward to talking with Dr. Finn, this afternoon about this, because I think the biggest thing about a lot of this research is we need to see where the money's coming from to back this research. It's we're dealing with a substance and a plant. At the end of the day, a plant that grows naturally out of this planet without us. We're dealing with a plant that has been illegal for 70 years, 70 plus years. So there's going to be biasness to it. And I'm not sitting here as an advocate saying that there are no negatives and that there are no downsides to it, but there obviously are benefits to it. And I think that nobody can turn their head to that. I think nobody can argue that it's perfect and it's a perfect substance. Anything can be abused. Anything can anything can, uh, everything in moderation, so to speak. And you can abuse anything. You can abuse water. So it's not. I don't think it's. I think we're focusing on the wrong things sometimes with cannabis, and that yes, there are problems, but we need to focus on what the benefits are. This is a tool for people. It's not an end all be all, just like nothing is, but it's a tool that we need to use, and we need to get the biasness. We need to get the taboo away from it. Make sure that the research that's being done is not carrying that same taboo that has been associated with for the past 70 years.
Well, I like what you say about who's funding the research because just in my own recent memory, if you look at a product like OxyContin, you got like Purdue Pharma was saying, yeah, we get the science, this is a non-addictive, and then you get these federal agencies signing off on this stuff. And then we find out later, all you got to do is watch that Hulu series, Dope Sick, and you find
Mm-hmm.
out that everybody got hoodwinked just because of money. But
Mm-hmm.
I remember back in the 80s and 70s when Valium came along, they said Valium was a cure for alcoholism, but yet it turned out, benzodiazepine addiction is worse than alcoholism. But yet it's backed by pharma, co-signed by FDA, all through special interest support. So you damn right it's buyer beware and consumer beware. And there's so much, I hate to say the word fake news floating around on every topic you can imagine, but this cannabis industry, the emerging news on the good, the bad, and the ugly, half of it's fake. I don't know where to get real information from. That's why I was excited about this podcast. And the more I go hang around with the cannabis industry people and followers, the more I realize I can't go into a store in Richmond where they sell, I don't even know what they call it, but they're like grow stores for consumers. But when I start talking to the staff, the owners, the personnel, I would bet over half of them said, "Yeah, I used to be an alcoholic, or I used to be an opiate addict, but now, this is all I do, and they look fine to me, and they're doing good. They're useful, productive members of the community, and they're all excited that there's some recovery houses popping up in the area that some of them let you use methadone, some allow Suboxone. They got some, if you just want to do cannabis and none of these other drugs, and the data's coming back pretty strong. Here within the first year, one of these houses, they got a 40% retention rate of their people, and that's pretty good for a recovery residence to have a 40% retention rate after a year of the same folks. So the data is promising. I mean, I see, and I don't see a whole lot of people collapsing over this. So, of course, I'm just a guy, boots on the ground in the community.
And that's what's hard is sometimes we don't have the scientific research to back some of that stuff up. Some of these things that some of these real world experiences that so many of us have. I came out to Colorado in 2014 with dollar signs in my eyes as far as a new industry, a career that's blossoming. I make a lot of money in it, but my life was completely changed being in Colorado those first 3 years and seeing, understanding the concept of a medical refugee, somebody that is fleeing their home state because they are not getting the help that they need. They're not getting the anything that they need. So they're fleeing to Colorado to be able to use cannabis legally, and it's changing their world. They're changing their lives, changing their kids' lives, their wives' lives. I've met countless families that have had to move from all across the country to Colorado or Oregon or Washington State so that they can get treatment for themselves or their wife or their kid. And these people are going on, from having a very poor daily life on many medications to coming out to Colorado to being able to get off a lot of those medications and really rely on cannabis and having great
Yeah,
results.
yeah. The good news, I think, what is it, like 30 something states have medical cannabis. So they're working in that specific area, but here again, because it's a federal regulated, it's on that the DEA Schedule 1. Like
Hmm.
we got guys here in Virginia, the state will pay for them to get on methadone. Very dangerous, hard to get off of, narcotics. Same with Suboxone, but yet they won't pay for them to take medical cannabis, which is probably cheaper or just as cheap and maybe in the long run and a lot less easier to get off of if you want to get off of it. But because of the Schedule 1 and the Medicaid, and they won't reimburse something on a Schedule 1, so they're actually once again discriminating in their own little paper pushing way. And you know me, I'm an abstinent based recovery guy, and I've always was raised in recovery. Be fearful of these things, which it's a healthy fear to have. I don't hang out in bars. I don't hang out in liquor stores. I don't hang out in pharmacies, and I don't see myself hanging out in grow houses or big cannabis parties. But at the same time, as I'm getting to know these people, I personally don't have any fear of consuming the product. I'm excited to be able to grow a plant and give it to my friends and neighbors or have access to it if that's what they want. So there's a lot of fear that I had that I just don't have no more. And the more I get to know what's going on around me, the less fear I have. And I wish other folks, could experience that. And another reason, I guess, I feel a call of somewhat to be in this space. If for no other reason than to destigmatize it, help run interference on the exploitation that's getting ready to happen, that's already happening. I don't know why God chose me. I don't argue with him much. I just complain sometimes. The so your vision, and I know you and your brother want to be, operative here in Virginia. What's the first couple things in front of you you'd like to see happen?
It's education. That's always the first thing for me. Like I said, I'm a big proponent of cannabis. Have been pretty much my whole life. But I also understand that it's not the end all be all, and it's not the fix for everybody. So I think the more education that we continue to push, making education the priority here, the more we'll learn about it, and the more information that we'll be able to give to the consumer or the patient, so that they can make good educated decisions about what's going to help them. At the end
What
of the day, that
you're thinking of education, what's the worst negative thing you've seen come out, like in Colorado? I mean, I'm talking about the effects of the cannabis plant. Is it kids dying or car wrecks or people not going to work or
that's a difficult question for me. Because a lot of these things, a lot of this, if you're talking about being a gateway drug, if you're talking about, the increased risk of vehicle accidents and all this stuff, I mean, it's how can we definitively say that that person was only intoxicated by cannabis? Most of the time, cannabis is something that is more used. It's a less, it's not as of a heavy drug for a lot of people. So I don't see it as a gateway, but I see it as like a stepping stone for people to use. So I think, just because someone might be high on cannabis, it's like, well, I'd like to see the whole toxicology report to see what else might be there. Because I think, there's a lot of people just trying to pinpoint right now, oh, it's cannabis, but it's, the
well,
research is not there. Our understanding of it's not there. How do we even understand what the limit is on somebody being able to drive intoxicated on cannabis? That's a standard that doesn't even exist right now, that people are trying to point out facts on about increased car accidents, yada yada. But there's no even standard to say whether or not somebody is intoxicated with cannabis. The test is whether or not there's THC, in their blood system, but it doesn't say anything in it doesn't say anything to how incapacitated they are because of it.
well,
So
my experience with cannabis consumers and driving is if the speed limit is 65, they go on 45. And now I can see where they might forget to stop for a green light, but also in Colorado, if you dig into the real facts, okay, increase in car accidents, increase in detecting cannabis in the drivers along with other substances, but there's also an increase in population. And then you had the rollout
Mhm.
of the legalization. So, if you put everything in proportion, I'm not sure it was that big of an impact, if any.
No, and time again from all these states, I mean, we're seeing statistics, we're seeing data that shows that crime is on a decrease. Crime associated with cannabis. Youth use is on a decline in these states. But that's a problem with it as well. Is we always have to look at. Because I'm sure if Dr. Finn was here, he would be able to cite research that said the exact opposite of that. And that's the problem, is that there's two different opinions, and you can skew data with however you want. At the end of the day, it's all about who's paying for it, and that's why I say.
I got a chuckle, man. I got you mentioned decrease in crime. I was at just yesterday. I was at this event in my county, Hanover County, and they had a sheriff there, and they had probably 10 sheriffs from surrounding county. They had Congressman Whitman was present, Congressman Higgins from New Orleans, and my own sheriff. He said, "Well, crime is down 18% in Hanover County." And the first thing I thought of, that's because they quit arresting people for cannabis. It'd be a
Mhm,
sharp decline overnight. The
mhm,
topic was, protecting the thin blue line, which I'm all about. You got to protect the thin blue line. You got to have good enforcement out there on crimes and public safety. But you're damn right, crime is down. When you legalize something, shouldn't be illegalized in the first place. That's the thought I had.
Yep.
The now, how are you doing out there company wise? Has things turned around since we last talked, or are you still?
Yeah, I think it's always, I think anybody in the regulated space now is, it's going to be more of a day-to-day thing. We're highly dictated by the market, and right now in Colorado, we're seeing the worst market that it's ever been as far as wholesale cannabis is concerned. Again, a number of different reasons. But yeah, we're ticking. We'll survive another day, and what's important at the end of the day. So
But you're not back where you were 6 months ago, eight
no,
months ago, a year
and
ago.
neither is the market, So,
Right.
like I said, we're very, very dependent on how the market's doing, and right now it's at all-time low. So,
Well, I'm going to do my special work with the big dog after this call, and you're going to see an uptick in prosperity. And just remember, it's because I'm pulling for you. So,
yeah.
now fuel prices going out of the roof right now. That affect the cannabis industry?
Absolutely. I mean, that freight, we deal with the same sort of issues that any other company or any other industry has to, as far as, increased fuel prices for freight and getting supplies, all this stuff, Yeah. So it's definitely affected us as well in this industry.
So that industry is tied right into the rest of the industries in America.
Absolutely.
Well, we've been chatting for a good little while now. I feel it's been productive. The anything you'd like to cover before we hang up here? Or I wish the doctor showed up. Though. I was looking for a
Uh,
spirited conversation. So
he probably thought it was two, like I did.
he might have, because I think he's out your way too, isn't he?
He's in Colorado, yeah. So that's why I say that. Yeah, because I just assumed that it was two, and I read the email, so I just would safe to say that he probably thought the same.
That might be it. Good Lord, we'll have to get you both back here on the same time though, because I would like to get you know yin and yang going.
Oh, absolutely, and that's what I was really looking forward to. Because, like I said, I think for everyone, everybody should always seek to have their opinion shattered. Nobody should hold on to their opinion, indefinitely. Everybody should be able to understand and hear good arguments, and to be able to rationalize it and bring it into your thoughts on your own. And that's what I was hoping to do today with Dr. Finn. I know that he has some concerns with it, and I'd love to hear those, and love to hear where they are coming from and seeing how warranted they are.
Yeah, a lot of times you hear about concerns and great minds come together and you can solve a lot of concerns.
Absolutely. It's
Yeah,
it's good communication, good dialogue, not trying to incite emotions, not trying to fight, just trying to come to the
right,
table to educate. And so I'd love to get on this again, with Dr. Finn
right.
for sure.
How things going in Virginia with Matthew and everything looking up or just stagnant or
It's looking good. To be completely honest, as a smaller operator, I'm really excited about the state repealing the rollout of the recreational use sales from
right,
medical producers.
right,
I think that would have been a really, really bad play in my mind. I think a lot of people are more focused on, oh well, we don't have anywhere to buy weed right now, but that is not the issue. That is not the issue. The issue is giving the ability to pharmaceutical companies to get a leg up and have recreational sales before anybody else has that opportunity. And no, to be completely honest, I don't think anybody should be for that.
right.
That's not creating a sustainable good market. That's just giving it to corporate pharmaceutical America, and I don't think anybody wants to go in that direction nowadays.
I think if they give anybody a leg up, they ought to give it to the farm to table folks, the backyard folks, the small
Hmm.
operator folks. I mean, that just doesn't make sense to me why you wouldn't want to empower the people, before the special interest, other than the fact that's who's paying the bill.
Absolutely. I mean, first and foremost, I loved what Colorado did when they rolled out their adult use recreational program back in 2014. Is they made you in order to be an owner on one of these licenses, you had to have a 2-year residency in Colorado, which didn't make it impossible for out of state operators to come in, but it did make it very, very difficult and not impossible for corporate people to come in, which it is good. I think that the residents of Virginia should have first right to come in and do this before multi-state operators from California, Colorado, Florida, Florida, Oregon, before all these guys start coming in. You know, it should be for the resident in Virginia, especially with where Virginia is as an agricultural state.
Yeah,
Um,
I just had a thought. What's the best state out there? Well, who's got the best model right now?
that's a tough one. I mean, that's a subjective question as well. You know,
Well,
you know,
who's got the worst?
California, in my opinion.
California. What
Yeah,
makes them the worst?
their barriers for entry as far as licensing are very, very high. Their taxes are absolutely outrageous. They're just everything across the board. It just makes it completely impossible to operate a business.
So, but the black market is doing pretty good in California.
It's better than it's ever been because of that. You know, a lot of people that wanted to come in into the regulated space and get licensed, they either did and was pushed out or weren't able to begin with. So what are they doing? The same thing they've always done, growing on the black market.
Yeah.
And as that quality on the regulated market goes down, more and more people are going to go to the black market.
You know, he said if you need a plumber, call the plumber. You need an electrician, call electrician. You need to know how to roll this stuff out. Call the people who experienced it. You know, quit
Amen.
specializing it to just whoever's paying you. So, well, I look forward to you when you come back out here to Virginia. Give me a call. You know, let's catch up. Get some seafood. You know, it's that time of year again. I always appreciate your company, and I appreciate you coming on. And we're going to try to get our communication straight on East Coast, West Coast time with the good doctor. So don't be surprised if you get an email saying, "Oops, let's regroup."
Sounds good. And I'm looking forward to it. I appreciate it, John. Always a pleasure.
Thank you, sir. Have a great day.
Thank you too.
Thank you, Justin. Good job.